Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Chase Life podcast with myself, David Godfrey. So today we're talking about limiting beliefs and how we destroy limiting beliefs and replace them with an unshakable sense of self-belief and commitment. And of course, the limiting beliefs that we are talking about are especially in the realms of beliefs about yourself or your capabilities or your future. And of course, in this episode, and because of our primary focus with what we do in Chase Life, a lot of what we'll be talking about will be limiting beliefs that people have around weight loss and fat loss. But of course, this applies to any area of life, whether it's career or finances or relationships or whatever it might be. So, when it comes to weight loss or fat loss, some of the most common struggles that people have are things like, what if I'm just meant to be this way? What if I'm just meant to be overweight? What if I don't deserve it? What if I'm not good enough? I've been struggling for years now. I've been struggling for decades. I've tried everything and nothing works for me. What if I truly commit with everything that I've got to a proper solution that actually works? And I give it my all, and I fail, and I'm still not good enough. Right? These are fears that we encounter again and again and again. And it's, on face value at least, very reasonable that people would struggle with those types of doubts and beliefs about themselves or their capabilities or their future. But, as you're going to discover, they are utterly false. And we're going to teach you how to destroy and eliminate those types of doubts and limiting beliefs forever and replace it with a resilient, unshakable sense of faith in yourself and in your future and the life that you're committed to. But of course, beliefs form one of the most pivotal foundations upon which any successful endeavor sits. How can anybody be successful in anything if at the end of the day they don't even believe it's possible? What are your chances of success if you're starting out the gate with some kind of thought like, well, I don't actually think anything works for me anyway. Maybe I'm just meant to be this way. How resilient you're going to be, how tenacious you're going to be. As Winston Churchill so eloquently put, success is going from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. But of course, if you're doubting at the end of it all that you can't do this, that nothing works for you, then how much enthusiasm are you going to sustain? Because as we know, failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. Right? It's necessary. We need to fail in order to learn important lessons. And as the saying goes, the lesson will repeat itself until the lesson is learned. But that's all they are, is really powerful, useful, necessary learning opportunities. But if we don't see it that way, and we see it as, there's yet more evidence that nothing works for me. Now, of course, it's normal, it's reasonable to feel a sense of frustration or perhaps disappointment for a moment when you have a failure because you wanted to succeed and you wanted this to be the thing, but okay. But if you internalize that as yet more evidence that you're just meant to be this way and nothing works for you, then, of course, now you get into this destructive cycle where you start the next method, the next solution, the next approach to your problem with a little bit less hope, a little bit less enthusiasm, a little bit less optimism. And so, of course, your commitment's going to suffer. You approach it from the perspective of, well, this looks interesting. I hope it works. Let's give it a go and see what happens. Right? What so many people would consider as, I'm just being realistic. No, you're just being afraid. No, let's call a spade a spade. You're just being afraid. But of course, you start out that next thing with a little bit less hope, a little bit less optimism, And so the moment that you hit the first obstacle, or maybe the second or third obstacle, the second or third struggle, then you start to doubt yourself or doubt the approach, and then you think, oh, maybe this isn't it, and then you go searching for something else, and the next thing you start, a little bit less hope, a little bit less optimism. This is why so many of the on the wagon, off the wagon cycles that we see people going through with weight loss get shorter and shorter and shorter. Right? Maybe the first weight loss approach that they tried, they were able to sustain it for a few months, and then they rebounded. And so then they tried the next thing, but then it only lasted a month. And then the next one only lasts a week, and then it only lasts a few days. Why? Because the doubt, the limiting belief gets stronger. Well, nothing works for me anyway, so what's the point in even trying? Well, might as well quit now. At least I can overindulge and enjoy it for a moment. So recognize how it becomes this self-perpetuating cycle. Right? And I'm sure intellectually you understand how all beliefs are self-fulfilling prophecies. If you start out with a belief like, there's no good men out there, or there's no good women out there, then what are your chances of even giving somebody an opportunity? And you might meet somebody who's amazing, but because you're so on high alert and super defensive, and with every interaction that you have with them, there's just this subtle background sense of, where is it? I know they're hiding something. I know they're going to do something. And they're going to feel that. That energy, of course, is going to repel them and push them away. Or maybe it just leaks out in really obvious, overt behaviors like jealousy, a lack of trust, constantly checking their phone when they walk out of the room. You know, sometimes it's really overt, things like that, but oftentimes it's just this subtle energy that just pushes that person away. And then you go, you see, I told you so. Yet another one. Not realizing that it was the belief that started the whole process off. And so it's the same in absolutely anything. And of course, it's the same in weight loss. And so oftentimes the reason why people are sabotaging themselves again and again and again is because of this. And then let's say that later down the line, they find an approach that genuinely is really smart, really well designed and sustainable and so forth. But they don't give it a chance in the same way that the person who's dating and has met somebody who is amazing, they end up sabotaging it anyway because they go, what's the point? Or I knew there was nobody out there, or I knew nothing works for me. And so the moment they encounter even just a bit of just normal, appropriate difficulty with this new weight loss approach or nutrition plan, which is completely appropriate, that they can absolutely navigate through without any, major issues, but they've already thrown in the towel because they've gone, there you go, you see, yes again. And so it's the belief that starts the whole process off. I think one of the biggest misconceptions and misunderstandings people have is, I'll believe it when I see it. No, you will see it when you believe it. Think about it. If you start out on any journey like this, which of course is going to be an extended journey, and I don't know what your personal journey is going to look like. It might be 6 weeks or 6 months or 2 years, depending on where you're starting from, and perhaps any health issues that you might need to overcome in the process of that. But if you're starting out from the perspective of, well, I'm only truly going to believe that this method, this approach works when I'm in the best shape of my life, well, how sustainable is that going to be? I mean, apply that to anything. Apply that to launching a business. I'm only truly going to believe that I can succeed as a business owner when I'm a multimillionaire. Good luck with that. There's so many problems for you to overcome along the way, and you've got to be resourceful and resilient and figure them out. What are the chances of that? Slim to none. If you're starting out with a belief of, or the approach of, I'll believe it when I see it. No, you'll see it when you believe it. It has to start with a belief. And if you think about it, of course, human beings must be able to get themselves to believe that they can achieve something that's never been achieved before. Otherwise, we'd all still be living in caves. We wouldn't have invented all of the amazing technology that we have around us. We would have accomplished nothing and probably died out. we wouldn't still be here. Of course, we have to be able to believe that we can do things that have never been done before. And when you look at the things that most people have limiting beliefs around, it's not even like we're asking you to do something that nobody's ever done before. It's not like we're asking you to break a world record or to achieve some kind of technological innovation or advancement that has never been achieved before. Plenty of people have done this. And you're convincing yourself already that it's impossible. And of course, I get that logically, intellectually, you recognize that it's nonsense. Intellectually, you understand that you don't have the only biological organism in the entire universe that defies the laws of thermodynamics, which is energy in versus energy out. Right? Basic science. Of course, your body is capable of losing weight and losing body fat and so forth. Of course, you understand that physiologically, it's possible. Intellectually, you get that. But emotionally, you're scared, and emotionally, you don't feel that. Why? Because you haven't achieved it yet, and you've got references that counter that. So, let's talk about beliefs, how they are built, how they are developed, and what we need to do in order to completely rewire what we're doing to ourselves in our brains, so that we can actually achieve and be successful at the things that we're looking to be successful through thick and thin. Because of course there's going to be struggles, of course there's going to be frustrations. But you use those to propel you to the next level. Again, the lesson will repeat itself until the lesson is learned, and you learn the lesson quickly, and then you bounce up to the next level quickly. So, beliefs are developed and we form them through what are called references. So if you think about the belief at the top, and then underneath that belief, we will have three different types of reference. And references are the things that you will use as, quote, proof. The truth is they're not proof, but you will think that they are, or at least you will behave and respond to them as though they are. And you're not doing any of this consciously, by the way. Right? I think it's really important in most of the work that we do that we highlight to people that this is very normal, this is very human, all human beings do this, and it's for the most part unconscious. So it's not like you're consciously choosing to do this, it's just how the human brain internalizes things and generalizes and so forth. So anyway, we will have references that we will behave as though they are proof of the belief itself. And there's three different types of reference. The first reference is your own experience. So in the example of a limiting belief around weight loss, like maybe I'm just meant to be overweight, maybe I'm just meant to be this way, it could be things like I tried the cabbage soup diet and failed. And I tried a juicing diet and failed. And so now I've got evidence of failure. And I can use that as a reference. I refer to it. It's a reference. I refer to it in the support of my limiting belief that weight loss doesn't work for me. Then we've got the second type of reference, which are external references. And these can come in many forms. It could be something that somebody's just told you. It could be something that you've witnessed in somebody else. You've just observed it. Or it could be something that you've read in a book, in a magazine. It could be something that you've even just seen in a movie, or something that you've watched in a YouTube video. Any kind of information that's been external, and it's come into your senses. And so it might be something like, oh, my friend Kevin struggles with his weight too, and he's tried everything too. Or my parents were overweight, and their parents were overweight. And so you use that as a reference. Because look, there's yet more evidence of people who try to lose weight but never succeed for their entire life. So maybe there's people that it really is just completely impossible. And maybe because it's my parents, maybe that just means that I'm just genetically encoded to be this way. So we're using an external reference to support the belief. And then we've got, actually, before I go on to number 3, let me talk quickly about two things that we will do with both our references from our past, our own experiences, and external references. So the first thing that we will do is we will filter. So filtering basically describes what you pay attention to. So our senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste, we are bombarded by millions of bits of data every second. And we need to be able to function. And in order to be able to function, we have to delete anything that's irrelevant. Right now, you're not thinking about the temperature of your left foot. Except now you are, because I've just mentioned it. But prior to my mentioning it, your brain was receiving that data, but it was just filtering it out. This is not relevant. This is unimportant. So we have to be able to filter in what's useful and relevant and important and filter out what's irrelevant. And we're constantly doing this every second. Unfortunately, we will develop habits for what we filter for. And as a consequence, we will automatically delete the opposite. The opposite exists in reality, but you've just deleted it from what we like to call your map of the world or your model of the world. You've just deleted it. Right? So if you're constantly in the habit of looking for what's wrong, then you'll delete what's right. If you're being perfectionist, in order to be perfectionist, one of the filters that you have to apply is constantly looking for what's not good enough in my work, in what I've submitted, whatever it might be. And as a consequence, you delete everything that is good enough. It doesn't show up in your map of the world. This is also one of the contributing parts of the pattern of negative body image. If you're constantly looking for what you dislike in your body, in your appearance, in yourself, then everything that you could love and be grateful for and appreciate in your body, in your appearance, in who you are, gets deleted, doesn't even show up. And if somebody points it out, it just doesn't have any impact because of the ways that you've learned to filter in this way. So we're constantly filtering. Now, when it comes to beliefs, this is critical for people to really, really get, is that anytime that you have a strongly held belief, you will automatically filter in all of the evidence that supports that belief, and all of the evidence that contradicts that belief gets deleted. And the thing is, you're not doing this on purpose. I don't want this to turn into a finger-pointing exercise where you start turning to anybody and everybody who has the opposite beliefs to you, and you want them to believe what you believe, and you just use it as a weapon to go, see, you're deleting this and this and this. Because all of us do this. This is just a natural human response. We automatically filter in the evidence that supports our beliefs and delete the evidence that contradicts that belief. If you're familiar with cognitive bias, this is one of the things that contributes to it. And the second thing, when it comes to the first two references, so our own past experience and external references, is that we will generalize. So if I try and fail to lose weight on the cabbage soup diet, does that mean that my body's broken and I can't lose weight? Or does that mean the cabbage soup diet is retarded? Obviously the latter. But if I then compile decades of that kind of experience, and I've tried and failed at this, that, and the other, and I look back over my history and I go, failure, 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 failure. Wow, maybe that means that I'm the failure. That's the way that our brain will generalize. And we're not doing this consciously or intentionally. This is one of the reasons why it's so critical for us to become self-aware and to develop self-mastery when it comes to these types of topics that we discuss on this podcast. Because if you leave your brain to its own devices, it will generalize, whether you like it or not. And so if you've tried a whole bunch of approaches to weight loss and you haven't made anything last long-term yet, and you're not aware of this process, then your brain's going to start generalizing. And it's going to come up with generalizations like nothing works for me. Is that true? Of course not. But that's the way that your brain will generalize. So these are two things that are critical for people to get when it comes to those first two references. Your own past experience and external references is firstly filtering, and then secondly, generalization. So let's move on to the third type of reference. The third type of reference is your own imagination. Is it possible for you to imagine something vividly in your mind and convince yourself it's happened? Of course it is. We've all done it, right? How many of you have done it with email? Somebody messages you and says, hey, I emailed you last week and I haven't got a reply. Did you not get it? And you write back and you say, yeah, I replied. And then you double check and you didn't. Maybe you half wrote a message and it's still in your drafts, or maybe you just thought about what you were going to message and you thought about that in so much detail that you convinced yourself you'd actually sent it. And then you were surprised to discover, oh no, it's not in my sent box. And you were completely wrong about that, but you'd convinced yourself it was true. So we do this all the time. Now, when it comes to your future, this is one of the hilarious things when we think about it, about just human nature, is that when we think about our future, then your brain favors the path of least resistance. So whenever you think about a particular topic, such as food, or your body, or health, or exercise, whenever you think about a particular topic, your brain favors the path of least resistance, which means it's going to produce thoughts and images and ideas that are the easiest and fastest to access or create. They are not the ones that are most true. They are not the ones that are most likely. They are not the ones that are a prediction of your future. They are just the ones that are fast to access. And which ones are the ones that are fast to access? The ones that you either have personal experience of or that you've obsessed over. Maybe something has happened once in your history and you've just played it on this endless loop over and over and over again and convinced yourself it's happened thousands of times. Because this is one of the interesting things about the human brain, is that subconsciously your brain doesn't know the difference between something that's happening for real and something that's being vividly imagined. That's why in the comfort of your own home, you can get your brain and body to respond as though you're in a frightening situation. If you just close your eyes and vividly imagine yourself in a really scary situation, it's dark, it's late at night, you're walking down some dodgy street or road or alleyway and you can hear footsteps behind you, and then you turn around and there's a group of guys following you, and you spend the time to really immerse yourself in that. What happens? Your heart rate goes up, your breathing rate goes up, your palms start to sweat. Your brain and your body respond as though you're actually in that situation for real, despite the fact you're in the comfort of your own home. So subconsciously, your brain doesn't know the difference between what's being vividly imagined and what's actually happening for real. So if you've struggled with something one time, let's say that you got bullied once at school. And of course, that's horrible. But it's in the past. But then every day for the rest of your life, you've replayed that event and that experience over and over and over again. As far as your subconscious mind's concerned, it thinks that you've been bullied thousands of times. When in truth, and this might be somewhat triggering for some people, and I don't mean it to be, but if you see it for what it really is, it's incredibly liberating, which is you got bullied once and then you bullied yourself thousands of times. Right? Because that person, they did that, and they did that one time. And then every single occurrence after that was you going there again. So this is why it's just so important for us to develop self-mastery over what we focus on and how we focus on it. And so then when it comes to our beliefs about ourselves, about weight loss, about our future, then oftentimes people say stuff like, I just can't imagine what life would be like without this problem. And if that's something that you feel, there's nothing sinister going on there. That just means you never have. Certainly not in any detail. Because those thoughts, those images, those ideas of you living your best life, They are not going to magically jump into your brain and then organize themselves into a vivid, technicolor, multi-sensory experience that then becomes your default for how you automatically think about this topic, whether it's food, your body, health, exercise, and so forth. That process isn't going to happen magically by itself. You've got to create it. You've got to design those images and those thoughts. But what most people are doing is they're driving into the future with their head stuck in the rearview mirror. I think I used this metaphor on a recent podcast. It's kind of like driving a speedboat and then deciding which direction you're going to turn based on the shape of the wake behind you. What does that have anything to do with where you're going? Absolutely nothing. But like I say, the brain favors the path of least resistance. So when people think about their future and their capabilities and weight loss and fat loss and food, then what do? They take images and thoughts and ideas from the past, and then they project them into the future, and then they wonder why history keeps repeating itself. But your past doesn't equal your future. But it will if you're driving into the future with your head in the rearview mirror. And so this is the third type of reference that we will use to support the belief, which is your own imagination, which is comical when you think about it. You've convinced yourself that something is utterly beyond your reach, purely based on imagining stuff and imagining your future as continuing to be doomed. So, what are we going to do about this? Well, let's begin the process of destroying these references. So when it comes to a belief, a really useful exercise is to, first of all, identify the key standout references that you've been using to support this belief. So, for example, your own past experience. What does it really mean that you tried the cabbage soup diet? Or you tried intermittent fasting, or you tried tracking your calories, and it didn't work and it didn't last? What does that really mean? Does that mean that you can't do it? You're doomed, you're broken, you have the only biological organism that defies the laws of thermodynamics, and that's it, you're stuck this way forever. Is that what it really means? Of course not. It could mean a number of things. It could mean that the approach that you were using is horrifically flawed and actually causes more harm than good. Hopefully you can recognize that at least with a few of the ones that I mentioned. But let's say that you did try a really smart, sustainable approach to food. It was really smart, it was really healthy, it was very sustainable, it was personalized for your preferences. And, quote, it didn't work. What does that really mean? Well, what it really means is that that is a tiny piece of the puzzle. And hopefully, if you've listened to enough episodes of this podcast, you're starting to understand that. That if you're struggling with food or your weight or fat loss, as we often say, fat loss is first and foremost an emotional problem. Because what's the real reason why people are struggling with their weight and with fat loss? It's all of the fuck it moments, as we like to call them. Just this once, this is the last time, it's been a bad day, I deserve a break, my boss never shouts at me, so this is really one of those exceptional circumstances where it's okay to write the day off. I don't want to justify my behaviors to my colleagues yet again and to come under scrutiny yet again, so I'll just do what they're doing just to keep the heat off my back. And so on and so on. All of these fuck it moments. None of those have anything to do with nutritional education or your nutritional approach. It's 100% mindset stuff. And so if you've been struggling with fat loss and weight loss, and you have tried some really smart, sensible approaches to nutrition and movement and exercise, and you still haven't made it last, okay, great. There's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback and information. And what's the feedback? The feedback is you haven't actually addressed the real problem, which is the mindset stuff, which is what we're getting to the bottom of here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these references and write down, what does it really mean? What does it really mean that I tried the cabbage soup diet and failed? Does that really mean that I'm broken and can't do it? No. What it really means is, and write it down. Write down whatever your response is, whatever you decide. Either that approach was horrifically flawed and actually caused more harm than good anyway, or actually, no, that approach is great, but it was only a tiny piece of the puzzle. It was like looking at the big picture through a straw, and I can only see a tiny little piece of it, and there's all of this other stuff that I didn't even address. Okay, great. We'll now go to what would appear to be the next biggest domino, the biggest bang for your buck issue for you to address. And the same with all of the subsequent ones. What does it really mean that my parents were overweight and their parents were overweight and my entire family was overweight? Does that mean that we are all biologically and genetically doomed to be overweight and that's it? All of my descendants will continue to be overweight as well? That's it? Like we are just genetically ruined? Is that what it really means? No. Write down what it means. What it really means is that they struggled with their own stuff that they never got to the bottom of. They didn't even address the real issue. It's just like with generational trauma, right? And what does it really mean that I've been imagining my future's being doomed? Well, okay, great. We already know that one's entirely fiction. And you can just start taking command of the images and thoughts and ideas that you start projecting into your future whenever you think about a particular topic. Right? That's why it's so important that we get clarity on what you want, why you want it, that you're fully committed to. And then you start painting that picture in such vivid detail and return to it frequently enough that that then becomes your default. Whenever you think about that topic, that's your habitual go-to. It's a muscle. You've got to train the muscle. Okay, so this is how we begin the process of destroying a limiting belief. Because if you imagine each of these references as being struts that support this limiting belief above it, what we're doing is we're just chopping down each of those struts to the point where there's nothing left to support the belief and the whole belief collapses. And you realize, wow, it's just all complete nonsense and complete fiction. However, and this is a big however, is a lot of this will start to kind of penetrate into your core emotionally, but not all of it. Certainly not for everyone. Some people, they go through this exercise and that's all they need. And they realize, wow, that is complete utter nonsense, is it? And they feel so emotionally free to just fully go after what they really want and to not hold back, and they're unstoppable from that point forwards. But lots of people, it remains at the intellectual level. And it doesn't fully eliminate the fear. Because logically, you understand everything that I've just been describing. But emotionally, yes, you still haven't experienced it yet. And so it's very normal to still have some fear. And if we are truly, truly honest with ourselves, most limiting beliefs, it's not that you truly believe that thing, it's just you're scared. And it's usually fear of three things. It's either fear of not being good enough, which is a self-worth thing. What if I try and fail? I truly commit with everything that I've got to a real solution that actually works and I fail, and that means I'm not good enough. Or it's the fear of unfamiliarity, the fear of change, the fear of uncertainty, which is where all of the overanalyzing and all of the what ifs are going to come into play. What if? What if? What if it doesn't work? What if I can't stick to it? What if, what if, what if? And so oftentimes people retreat back into their, it is their comfort zone. I mean, it's uncomfortable because they're struggling with this problem, but in a weird sort of way, it's familiar. As far as your survival brain is concerned, anything that is unfamiliar seems scary. This is one of the reasons why so many people remain in this cycle of destructive relationships. Right? And maybe they manage to escape one destructive relationship, but then they fall back into another either physically or emotionally abusive relationship, or certainly somebody who just doesn't treat them with the worth that they deserve. Why? Because they don't see the worth within themselves, and so that's the type of partner that they're attracting. But going to a relationship with somebody who is completely different to that, who does treat them with respect, with unconditional love and so forth, whilst on the one hand it's really nice, on the other hand it's so alien that the brain goes, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what's going to happen next. This is unpredictable. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And then they just retreat back into their comfort zone again. So a lot of what holds people back is just the fear of change, the fear of stepping into the unknown. And then the third fear is the fear of hard work, the fear of just the discomfort of personal growth. Because one of the big things that holds people back is the fact that change is painful. If we talk about the concept of the comfort zone, change happens outside your comfort zone. Which means that by definition, in order to grow and change, you have to embrace pain. And not just once or twice when it's convenient and when it suits you, but consistently and relentlessly until you make the change permanent. And what I really mean by that is the change in yourself and who you are. Right? Because obviously, when it comes to your physiology, nothing's permanent in the sense of you can't just follow a healthy plan for a few weeks, get into great shape, and then go, right, that's done, and then go back to how you used to eat. Right? It's not going to be permanent in that regard, but it's permanent in the sense of this is just who I am now and how I operate. And so, like I say, change requires stepping into pain. Pain might be an aggressive word. It's just, most of the time, it's just uncomfortable and inconvenient. But let's call it pain. And stepping into pain consistently, over and over and over again, doing what it takes, when it takes, until it takes. And most people are not willing to do that. Most people haven't, ironically, had enough pain. This is one of the things I say sometimes, is that in order for some people to truly, truly get to a point where they are ready and willing to do whatever it takes, they just haven't had enough suffering yet. Excuse my French, but the way that I phrase it is they haven't had their fuck this shit moment, where they go, fuck this shit, I cannot and will not tolerate this as my personal standard or my quality of life moving forwards anymore. That's it. I'm done. I don't care what the solution likes. I don't care if I've got to work harder than anybody else. I don't care if I've got to work longer than anybody else. This is happening. Let's go. That level of commitment, when you're ready to crawl on your belly through glass to make this happen. One of the things I often say is when you're willing to walk through fire, you rarely have to do so. Now, you're still willing to do so if that's what it's going to take. But ironically, when you're that committed, you get out of your head and you just get into action. You're not stuck in your head negotiating with yourself, debating with yourself, wondering if you can give yourself a night off or take it easy and blah, 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 blah. You just get out of your head and get into action and just get it done. So that is one of the key elements of the solution. One of the key ways to overcome limiting beliefs. What if I can't do it? What if nothing works for me? What if I'm just meant to be overweight? What if I'm just meant to be this way for the rest of my life? The key solution is to get to emotional threshold where you're willing to do whatever it takes. And by the way, doing whatever it takes doesn't mean starting again on Monday and just doing what you've always done. It's so ironic when people say, I've tried everything, and then you dig into it, and they've tried one thing over and over and over again, which is diets. And as we've just established, struggling with food at the end of the day is not that much to do with food. Sure, we need to address it. We need a smart, healthy, sensible, sustainable approach. But on its own, that's not going to fix it anyway, because that's just a tiny surface level piece of the puzzle. The real solution is all of the mindset and the emotional stuff underneath it all. But people just convince themselves that I've tried everything. So we need to get to that point of emotional threshold where you're ready and willing to do whatever it takes, what it takes, when it takes, until it takes. and where you're so committed and you're so relentless that you actually embody that Winston Churchill quote, that success is going from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Ironically, you typically tend to skip out, any of the significant failures from that point onwards, right? Most of the big failures that people have are where they literally just go completely off the rails, where they just lose all hope, all faith, and they just go, screw it, it's not even worth trying, so I might as well, it's the throwing your toys out of the pram kind of response, where you just go all the way the other way, as opposed to having a minor setback and asking the question, what's good about this? How can I use this as an investment in my future success? What can I learn from this? And so now you're able to springboard from learning opportunity to your ultimate success. Because if you approach it that way, I guarantee you will succeed. 100%. If you approach it with that perspective of, I will not tolerate this as my personal standard, my quality of life, that's it, I'm done, I don't care what it takes, I'm all in, you will succeed. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will succeed. Because you'll keep going, you'll be relentless, and you'll get to the bottom of what actually matters. You'll get to the real issues that are actually holding you back, like all of the mindset and emotional stuff that we've been discussing. And you'll fully commit to the work required to make those changes. Most people are just looking for surface level solutions and convenient quick fixes. Why? Because they doubt themselves, because of all of these limiting beliefs. That's one of the symptoms of self-doubt and limiting beliefs, is that you don't truly go for a full solution that solves the entire big picture puzzle. You go for something that doesn't seem like too big a risk or commitment or sacrifice. Because that way, if it doesn't work, well, I didn't lose too much anyway. And so you dabble, and you go from quick fix to quick fix to quick fix. But unfortunately, that only feeds back into yet more references that support your crappy belief. Yet more failures that chip away at your self-belief and your hope and faith in yourself and in your future and in your capabilities. Which is why if you get to that place of proper emotional threshold, let's make a proper commitment to a real solution that actually solves the issue. So really, the biggest solution is courage. Because what we've just been through today in terms of eliminating limiting beliefs is super powerful stuff. Definitely use it. But for so many people, it's not going to eliminate the fear 100%. There's still going to be that fear there because it still is the unknown. You can't succeed at any significant endeavor without stepping into the unknown. So of course there's going to be that sense of uncertainty, which for a lot of people can translate into fear. So the solution is not to get rid of the fear, it's to develop courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's feeling the fear and doing it anyway. But by doing the exercises that I've given you today in terms of destroying all of those references, hopefully that diminishes the fear enough for you to then step into courage, to feel the fear, step over the threshold, cross the bridge of fear, and actually take meaningful action and make a genuine commitment. A genuine commitment to go all in, to do what it takes, even though you're scared. And that's when it also starts to translate into more excitement. Actually, it's very interesting to recognize that biologically, physiologically, the symptoms of fear and excitement are exactly the same. If you measure them with things like increase in blood pressure and heart rate and palm sweating and so forth, it's the same. It's the same physiological responses. But you'll be able to shift more to that excitement. And when it comes to us with Chase Life Intensive and the work that we do, most of our clients join us with a mixture of excitement, but also with some nervousness, because it's super important to them. They've got a lot riding on it. This is a really significant thing for them to address and resolve in their life. So it's normal. It's totally normal to have some of that nervousness. But hopefully through this episode, you can recognize that also it's more excitement because now you've made that commitment. You've reached that point of emotional threshold where you realize, you know what? I'm going to make this happen. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And now you're able to recognize, if I haven't fully and permanently overcome these struggles yet, that says nothing about me or my capabilities or my future. And everything to do with the methods that I've been trying so far. Okay, great. And now you're relentless, now you're unstoppable. So, I hope you found that super useful, regardless of what your endeavors may be. Obviously, I've focused a lot on weight loss and fat loss, but hopefully you can see how that applies to literally everything in life. Whatever you're looking to upgrade and take to the next level, your overall lifestyle, your happiness, your relationships, your parenting, your finances, your career, it all starts with the belief. And it's not, I'll believe it when I see it, you'll see it when you believe it. And you truly, truly make that commitment to it. So if you would like some help with fat loss, weight loss, and in particular overcoming compulsive behaviors or what you might have considered in the past to be self-sabotaging behaviors around food, then reach out to us and ask us about Chase Life Intensive. So you can go to chaselifeconsulting.com and look us up, do some homework on us, and you can apply for a call through that website. Or you can also just email Rachel directly, rachel@chaselifeconsulting.com. Anyway, that's enough from me. See you on the next episode.